He's a former general manager with a number of Super Bowl rings to his title, an NFL analyst, and an author as well. Michael Lombardi, good morning and welcome to WDHA.
Good morning. It's always good to be on in Jersey. I love it. I appreciate it. I am a product of, as I wrote in my book, I am from the Church of Springsteen. So anything that happens with Jersey, I am delighted to do.
Let me go to the Bruce Springsteen comparison since you brought it up. You made an interesting comparison between Tom Brady and Bruce Springsteen in the brand new book, by the way, which is called Football Done Right. Tell our listeners about that.
Well, my first book, I wrote about Springsteen's incredible ability. As a 15-year-old kid, I saw him sing Born to Run. And it was the first time I really ever heard it live. And when I was in Florence, Italy in 2013, as a 52-year-old man, I heard him do it again. And I've heard him do it numerous times. And it sounded like the first time with the same enthusiasm, the same passion, the same vibrancy, and so Malcolm Gladwell talks about 10,000 hours. You got to put 10,000 hours into something. But I think he left us short. I think he put a period on the sentence too soon. You also have to have that born to run enthusiasm, that ability to do things over and over again with passion. And that's Brady. Brady can do it. He doesn't get bored. Springsteen doesn't get bored. I mean, he plays the songs as if you've never heard them before. And he has that ability. And that's a rare competitive trait to hold on to. And I think Brady does it. I think the greats, the true greats, and Springsteen's great, they have that quality. And so I call it the born to run theory. It's just you got to do it. Sinatra got tired of singing New York, New York. He got tired of singing My Way. People get bored. It's one of the things that you fight against as a leader, you fight against as a human.
In your new book, in fact, Tom Brady is the number one of the top 100 players of all time. And I'm not surprised by that. What kind of surprised me, though, Michael, in a league that's been dominated by quarterbacks for at least 30, if not more years, only one other quarterback made the top 10, and it wasn't anybody named Montana, Peyton Manning, even Aaron Rodgers, who's obviously still playing.
Yeah, I went back and watched a lot of Johnny Unitas. As a young executive in the league, I put my giant foot in my mouth, and I was doing a program with Ernie Accorsi, who I worked with and for in Cleveland, and Steve Sabo at NFL Films down at Morristown, and we were talking about quarterbacks, and I arrogantly said, as if I knew it all, well, Unitas couldn't play today; he's too slow. And they looked at me like I had some kind of leprosy. And so they said, "You're wrong." And I watch, go back and watch. And I did. And I fell in love with the player. I mean, what I learned about the NFL is being quick-minded is better than being quick-footed. And when you can make rapid decisions and you can throw the ball with incredible accuracy, understanding that, to me, the separation between Johnny U and Peyton and Montana is nobody protected Johnny U. He got the crap beat out of him. I mean, he had an innate sense of toughness because he was going to get killed. Those quarterbacks in the 60s and 70s, they took a beating. No rules protected them. And I'm not saying Peyton, wasn't tough or Joe wasn't tough, who I watched. I just think it was a harder game. Remember, Unitas called all his plays. He went onto the field. He called the plays. He ran the plays. He did everything. And he still got the crap beat out of him because the rules, offensive linemen had a block like this, right? There was no pass protection. I mean, the Red Bank native, former Red Bank Catholic head coach, Vince Lombardi, said, his Bart Starr got sacked 9 times in the ice ball. What do you think talk radio would have done to Lombardi after Starr got sacked 9 times, right? They would have killed him. Lombardi, he doesn't know anything about pass protection. He's an idiot, send him back to Red Bank Catholic, but they didn't. And the rules, it was the rules. And I think Unitas, had he played in a game like today, he would dominate today. He would be quick-minded. He would be unbelievable because he had that ability.
Michael Lombardi is my guest here at 105.5 WDHA. The new book, Football Done Right, setting the record straight on the coaches, players, and history of the NFL. Staying with Unitas and calling his own plays, you talk early on in the book about how there were players who were also coaches, and you mentioned Curly Lambeau and George Halas. And I think of a guy like Unitas who was calling his own plays. And then players would often say that Peyton Manning on the field, it was like having another coach. Same with a guy like Tom Brady. They just saw the game differently than so many of the other players.
Yeah, I fought with my editor on this one when I was writing up Manning. I every time I watch the Bourne Identity or one of the first Bourne one with Matt Damon, and he's sitting in that restaurant and he doesn't understand why he knows what he knows and what he sees. Sherlock Holmes talks about seeing and observing. Well, Damon in that playing Jason Bourne, he knew everything. I know the guy's left-handed. I know this guy's got a gun. He went through all these things in about a matter of seconds. And the woman that was sitting with him in the coffee shop was like, "Oh my God, how do you know that?" That's how Manning processed. He was Jason Bourne like. He could come to the line of scrimmage and just all of a sudden, computer like, sort all this data out in 25 seconds or less and then make the right decision. It's hard to do. That's impossible. Montana, same thing. Brady, unbelievable. I don't think people understand how hard it is from the time the quarterback breaks the huddle till he sees everything and then he decides, why didn't the Indianapolis Colts motion? Everybody loves motion. One of the stories I tell in the book is Bill Walsh was coaching for the Bengals, and Bob Trumpy lined up on the wrong side at tight end. And he moved over from left tight end to right tight end, and three people moved around on the defense. And Walsh said to Bill Johnson, maybe we should put Y motion in. That might confuse the defense. That's how motion became effective. And so why didn't the Colts use motion? The Colts didn't use motion because Manning wanted the defense to sit still so we could figure out what the hell they were doing. And if they were moving around, it hurt his process of uncovering the defense. And that's a unique quality to have, and Unitas had it.
Why do you think more players don't go into coaching?
It's hard, a lot of hours. The money's good now, but you got to really put the time in. I don't think players understand how hard it is and how much, as Al Davis told me, and I write in the first chapter in the introduction of the book, you don't work in the NFL. You got to live in it. I mean, you live in it, and it takes a toll on you. It really does. I was fortunate enough to have a great wife and raise two boys who are now in coaching themselves. It's hard. It's a hard profession to do, and it takes a lot of time. And usually players have made so much money, they'd rather dabble in the stock market and watch their money grow than work 18, 19 hours a day.
It's obviously a little early in the college football season, but your thoughts on Deion Sanders, who was a remarkable athlete, played both sides of the ball in football, a great baseball player as well. What are your thoughts on him?
I've been fortunate enough to be around some incredible people. And one of the most incredible people is a man by the name of George Raveling, who was a former basketball coach at Iowa, Washington State, and USC. He was on the stage when Martin Luther King gave the speech. And when Martin Luther King came off the stage, Coach Raveling asked Dr. King if he could have a copy of that speech. And he gave it to him. And he's owned the speech up until 2 years ago. And we started a website called The Daily Coach because we believe everybody needs a coach. It's a free newsletter that goes out to everybody. And we wrote about Deion. And what happens to a lot of us is we get a perception. We label people. And Deion's easy to label. Flashy, diamonds, talks. We label him that way. But at the core of who Deion is a leader. He's old school, holds people accountable, demanding, pushes for excellence from his people, has a message, great storyteller, right? One of the things that Lombardi learned, and I write about it in the book from Earl Red Blake after he left Fordham to go to work at West Point, was the power of how was he going to be a leader? What kind of leader was he going to become? And storytelling really tells the tale of leadership. And I think that's where Deion excels.
Michael Lombardi is my guest here at 105.5 WDHA. Football Done Right is the name of his brand new book. There's a section on television, and obviously football and television are perfect together. I think of a guy like Tony Romo, and I think if you do a second edition of this book, I think you're going to end up putting Romo in there. I watched, his first couple of years as an analyst, and he's reading the defense as it's out there. And he's telling you what's going to happen. And that was something revolutionary that I don't recall anybody ever doing.
No, I mean Madden didn't even do it. I think what Romo proves in what I try to write about in terms of Cosell and Brett Musburger and Madden is that the fans have an insatiable appetite to peel back the layer to learn about what's going on before the ball snapped and what could happen after the ball snapped. We don't get enough of that. We spend too much time talking about stories, talking about, the player, where he's from, yada yada yada. The fans want to know the chess part of football. And Cosell, when he first went to ABC, nobody wanted football at on television. Here's how interesting it is. Monday nights in America in 1971 was dominated by appointment television. CBS had Gunsmoke, I Love Lucy, Andy Griffith. NBC had Rowan and Martin, Doris Day. And bowling leagues were the most popular thing in sport in the world. Everybody was in a bowling league, and Monday night was bowling night. Well, when Monday Night Football came rolling around on ABC with Howard Cosell, people stopped bowling. People stopped watching Gunsmoke. People stopped watching Rowan and Martin. They tuned into Howard because Howard was going to say something. He was, and 50% of the switchboard lit up with people that hated him. 50% loved him because he actually said something. Why do we love Barkley today? Why does everybody love Barkley? It's really not hard. You love Barkley because he's honest. He's authentic. He says what he thinks. And yet no one models themselves after Barkley. They try to patronize everybody. And Cosell called it jockocracy, where former jocks are now protecting new jocks. And he thought that was wrong. And I think by his popularity, that was correct. Think about this. He had his own show called Saturday Night Live. That was before Saturday Night Live. He gave it to Saturday Night Live. He introduced Sinatra at the Garden in front of 20,000 people when Sinatra came out of retirement. I mean, that's a powerful figure.
Yeah, truly larger than life, no question about it.
Yeah, and that's what advanced the game. I mean, the power of Cosell, the Musburger being betting into it, right? He's got Jimmy the Greek standing next to him. And people are want to bet on the games. I mean, we're in Jersey, right? We all know that every construction site had cards for games, right? People passing them out left and right. I mean, I didn't gamble, but I can remember my Uncle Frank. He used to come around with all these cards. You put $1 in, you circle all the plays, and everybody wanted to bet. But when he put Greek on TV, all of a sudden things changed. The sports phone, nobody remembers the sports phone, right? Macy's started the Santa Claus hotline in '64. And they had kids call Santa Claus and tell them what they wanted. Well, it broke the New York system. It broke the phone system in New York. And years later, a guy bought that line and he put the sports phone in because we couldn't get scores. And bettors wanted to know up to the minute scores. And he was able to deliver.
I never knew that. I knew a bunch of guys who worked at Sports Phone. I never knew that about the history of it, though. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's unbelievable, right? And it all came from Macy's. Macy's had the idea of call Santa and tell him what you want. They destroyed the phone system in New York, went kaput.
Michael Lombardi is with us this morning at 105.5 WDHA. Football Done Right, setting the record straight on coaches, players, and history of the NFL is his brand new book. Christian Fourier, who won a couple of Super Bowls, a tight end with the New England Patriots, among some other teams he played for. He has said in a couple of different interviews, Michael, that everybody has the same plays. They all run the same routes. Why do some offenses appear to be more complex than others?
Because the ones that are the complex start with simplicity. Einstein has 5 levels of intelligence, and everybody thinks the number one level of intelligence is brilliance, right? No, for Einstein, the number one level of intelligence was simple. So when you start with a simple concept and you start with simple plays, every week you can become more complex, because what happens is the players know what to do and then they adjust to the week. So if you study Belichick, he starts with simplicity and ends up going to complexity. But when you start with complexity, you can't get to simple. And that's really what happens. Dan Henning told me a long time ago, if you don't have any tendencies, you're not any good. And that's about everything we do in life. If you don't have any tendencies, you're not going to get any good, because the more you can repeat things, the better off you are.
The book is really a terrific read, and it's an interesting take on the history, cut down into different levels, whether it's the top 100 players or talking about coaching and what have you. You talk about George Seifert in the book, and he is not, I was surprised to learn this, not in Canton. How much of that do you think is because he's the guy who followed the legend Bill Walsh?
for all the reasons. And then when he went to Carolina, he didn't win. And so it's easy for people to say, well, see, he didn't win. He only won because of Walsh. You know how hard of a job it is to take over for Bill Walsh? How many people after they took over for Bear Bryant have suffered? How many coaches have taken over for Don Shula that couldn't win? I mean, it's hard. Guy won 3 Super Bowls. So they're not going to give him any credit. I found it really hard to understand. That's why I tried to. I think the whole coaching thing is wrong. That's why I put a criteria in place. Because if you don't have it, how do you accept people? One thing I learned in scouting is about elimination. You have to have a criteria, and if people don't fit the criteria, they don't get in. Right? Everybody thinks scouting is about finding. Oh, I'm going to find a play. No, it's about elimination. So when you set a criteria, that eliminates certain people, and now you're not debating over, does this guy work? Does this guy not work? And I think some of these coaches, Marty Schottenheimer is the 8th winningest coach in NFL history. He's got a 61% winning percentage. He can't get a sniff. He can't get a sniff to get in the Hall of Fame. Now, so we put it in perspective. There's over 500 gentlemen that have called themselves head coaches over the history of this league. 9 of them have 200 wins or more. 9 out of 500, you belong in the Hall.
You talk in that section, by the way, the Lombardi criteria of coaching. Number 6, I believe it is, game-changing impact. Looking now at the game and who's coaching now, in the coaching ranks, who do you see that might be one of those game-changing coaches?
Well, I think Kyle Shanahan up at San Francisco, through his dad, is kind of what we're going to start to see is positionless football, right? We're no longer, everybody's complaining about the running backs not getting paid. Well, running backs would get paid if they didn't have a position, if they were part receiver, part running back, if they are like McCaffrey, who can line up in the slot and run routes, or if they can run from the inside run game. Positionless game is where we're going. But one of the things that struck me, and it has influenced me since the day I watched it, Belichick and I are at a Cleveland Cavaliers game in Cleveland, and they're playing the Bulls. And we were fortunate enough to sit behind the Bulls bench. And Phil Jackson's the coach, and they've got the great team. And the Cavaliers are really good. Lenny Wilkens is coaching. They got Mark Price, Brad Daugherty, Larry Nance. They're really good. And I watched Jackson, and whenever Lenny would substitute, Jackson would put his fingers and do that whistle that he used to always do. And he would move Jordan from the off guard, from the 2 to the 3, and move Pippen from the 3 to the 1. And now Lenny had a substitute to get the right matchups. So he was substituting Jackson without substituting. And that's the essence of greatness, is when you can substitute without substituting. When you can leave one set of players on the field and they all play different positions, you got something special. You studied, you knew the Patriots. The Patriots, when they had Gronk and Aaron Hernandez, they were what we call a 12 team, 1 back, 2 tight ends. But Hernandez lined up in the backfield.
Mm-hmm.
Gronk lined up as a receiver. And so how do you match up to that? How do you handle that? And how do you know when they're going to do that? See, that's simple, but for the defense, it becomes complex.
And to go back to your top 100 players, we were just talking about game-changing in terms of the Lombardi criteria. Number 2 player of all time, and this was not a surprise, and Giants fans here should know Lawrence Taylor, because he changed the game.
One
of the few players in the history of the game to change the game.
He changed the blocking scheme. I mean, it's funny. Belichick did an interview the other day on long snappers, and the guy, and one of the reporters asked him, why do you carry a position just for long snappers? And Belichick went through the whole history of Onyx of long snapping, which was great, but he left out a part that he contributed to too. He made Lawrence Taylor the gunner.
Mm-hmm.
And when Lawrence Taylor's coming after you as the gunner chasing you, you're like, I'm not, And then Parcells actually got mad, because then the Washington Redskins made Dexter Manley the gunner, and Charles Mann. All of a sudden, people started putting these big guys outside a gunner. It's like, see, if you didn't do that, nobody would have copied it. And but Lawrence Taylor, I mean, it's comical how people don't truly understand how when somebody compares Micah Parsons to him, and Micah Parsons is a really good player. I'm not suggesting that. But you're not going to see another Lawrence Taylor for a long, long time. You're not going to. I mean, this is somebody that played the game with that Springsteen passion, with unique talent.
Michael, for listeners who want to get a hold of the Daily Coach that you referenced a little earlier in the interview, how do they do that?
We're online, www.thedailycoach.com. or search Michael Lombardi, Daily Coach. You'll find us. We're there. We write a morning email. It hits your inbox at 7 o'clock. We've got 35,000 email subscribers currently now. And we have about a 45% open rate, which we're doing good. So we try to, Coach Rav and I were both sitting around a lunch table one day, and we were both reading Bill Campbell's book called, The $1 Trillion Coach. And Bill Campbell used to be the former college football coach at Columbia. And Rav and I looked at each other and said, we all need a coach. Everybody needs a coach in their life. And so hopefully our website provides you with a little bit of coaching every morning.
The book is called Football Done Right, Setting the Record Straight on the Coaches, Players, and History of the NFL. If you want to follow him on Twitter or X, whatever we're calling it these days, it's at ML Lombardi NFL. Michael, thank you so much for your time here on WDHA. The book is a wonderful read.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me.